Audience times matter. Defund mediocre writers. Audience's time matters. Defund mediocre writers. Is how I'd best describe and parody the experience of watching Prime/Fury V/who cares adaptation of Alex Cross starring Aldous Hodge. I tuned in to see how Aldous Hodge would handle a character that I admittedly know next to nothing about, save for he was once played by Tyler Perry and Morgan Freeman once upon a time. Hodge has been a favorite here in Schlenderhouse since his days on Leverage, and that really was enough of a selling point for me. So imagine my disappointment in this tonally uneven, bland, flat, boring mess of a show that cannot figure out what it wants to be. It's not all negative, but it comes pretty close. So let's dive into what I can only say is a giant waste of audience time. Setting the stage, the show opens with a community leader in the Black Lives Matter movement in DC found dead in his car. Finger pointing starts instantly as the deceased sister believes the cops killed him for the aforementioned Black Lives Matter and Defund the Police movement. As the top brass just want to sweep it under the rug as an overdose, Cross is brought on board for having known the victim a bit, having some fame from a previous case, and of course for optics. Cross and his partner Samson are called the Tom Squad by the sister, but the grieving mother just asks Cross to find out who killed her son. This generational divide between mother and daughter and how they perceive the police, let alone black police, is interesting and immediately scuttled. They do almost nothing else with this dynamic, and what could have been a nuanced look into black police officers just doing their jobs during BLM and Defund the Police could have had something relevant to say. Instead, we get a show that isn't sure whether to applaud Cross for his brilliance and hard work or skewer him for not having both feet firmly placed in the black community. There's even a scene where Cross and Samson are having dinner with a bunch of, quote, academics, unquote, and one guy finds out that Cross and Samson are cops. He launches into a vitriolic diatribe about where their loyalty should lie, but when they get the command to get those, a word I can't say for sure, he will. Cross responds with violence towards the man, clearly not doing anything to negate the argument of police brutality. However, the show even ends with Cross promising to be a better black man when it comes to his policing. So you see, we are picking up about a year after Cross's wife was murdered. I was going to say has passed, but no, she's straight up murdered. And he is recently back from a suspension. So he was suspended because he was tracking down some clues as to who killed his wife. He comes across a suspect, chases him down, beats him, and points a gun to his head. His partner Samson, being a rather dutiful cop, reports Cross, and Cross is suspended. Video of Cross doing this is released later in the show in a rather cunning move by the antagonist, and it causes all sorts of problems for our flawed hero. The police chief reaches a discreet settlement with the man Cross assaulted in order to keep it out of the news and to prevent Cross from losing his badge. Now, keep in mind, all this is happening concurrently with our main story involving a serial killer and a ticking clock. Cross sets up an interview with the man and is essentially just as a black cop, as a black man, when a cop rolls up, you run. And the next time you see a black man running, you need to think like a black man and not a cop. To which Cross admits he will try harder to be more black. It's weird, and I don't think the show quite nailed the point that they were going for, especially after Cross literally just took down a truly twisted serial killer and survived a rather grueling personal ordeal that endangered his family. I'm not saying there may not be a point to be made about the nature of being a black police officer in a black community, but I am saying after two big wins on the importance and on the back of law enforcement and him thinking and acting as a cop should, saying maybe take a step back from being a cop seems like poor timing in a scripted show. Like, good job, hero cop, but next time be less cop and be more like a black man. And Cross, for all of his flaws, is a heroic figure, though. He's shown to be a loving father, someone who clearly cares about his community and has the overwhelming desire to protect those around him. Like, those are admirable traits in any profession, right? And as the show keeps telling us, he's a singular talent in this, as both detective and forensic psychologist. I wish the show handled his forensic psychologist background a little better. Whenever he goes into cross mode, it seems more like he's babbling to himself than truly taking in the information. That might be how it is in the books, but in a book you can have internal monologue. In a show you need to make it visually distinct, not just like a slow dolly push in. I think there may have been police lights in the background one time when he did it, but I can't remember. It's nothing nearly as excellent as in Hannibal when Will goes over the crime scene and you get that strobing yellow light effect. That was fantastic. But truthfully, you don't even need to go that extreme to show that Cross is having internal monologue. Something as simple as slowing time, fading the audio, then have Cross move while everyone else is kind of like frozen in time. I think we could get the idea that like this is happening in his head, not in real time. I know it's a small complaint, but something that would give the show a little more character and pop, you know? Regardless, his skills end up coming into play when investigating the death of the community leader. He stumbles upon a serial killer that is targeting victims, forcing them to undergo cosmetic alterations to appear like famous serial killers, and then recreating their executions. It's pretty dark and honestly pretty entertaining at first. As I mentioned, the show does not respect the audience time. At 8 episodes, this show should move. It should be a race against time to find the killer and his newest victim. But man, there is a lot of bloat. I understand real policing takes time and not everything can be like go, go, go. But the pacing is just all over the place. And I put a lot of that on the family drama, right? There's a lot of family drama that just keeps coming up, which would be fine for the first half of the show where they don't know what the stakes are and that another like victim was taken. But once it becomes clear that they are running out of time, the family drama really needs to take a backseat to Cross's attempt to save a life. Instead, we just keep getting family and interpersonal drama that honestly is so out of place and only serves to reiterate things we already know. I became so bored with the lack of resolution or just these characters being unable to see like for the greater good, maybe now is not the time, right? Here's an example. Cross has to go to Philly to interview a guy who knows something about our killer. Now this is right after the footage of Cross beating man was released, so Cross is suspended and acting unofficially, which he does a lot in the back half of this season, but there seems to be no consequence for it. But I don't want to get into that. It's something else. So Cross's son saw some kids at school showing the video to his little sister, and when the other kid refused to stop, Damon socked him. This leads to him being suspended the day before Cross plans to head to Philly. Cross's Nana Mama, as he was raised by his Nana after his parents died, says she needs to slow down and talk to his son. Cross insists that a schoolyard fight is not as important as getting to Philly to track down the lead on a killer, correctly so I might add, but Nana Mama insists that taking Damon for the drive to Philly is the best way for them to talk. This is an obscenely bad idea. Cross doesn't know what he might be walking into in Philly. Bringing the kid to check in on someone and say, stay in the car, that's just dumb. Any number of things could have happened. Like, what if Cross gets hurt? Now his son is in Philly with no support network and his father isn't even supposed to be there. To say nothing of how it grinds the plot to a halt, as yet again, we discuss how Cross isn't being open enough about the death of his wife. I mean, every character harps on him for not doing enough to move on from the death of his wife. It gets so annoying. I know Samson has a very good reason because it is negatively impacting his police work, so that makes sense to me. But Nana Mama saying he needs to get over it because his kids need him comes across as just a little wrong in tone. I understand what she's getting at, that, you know, he needs to be like more supportive as a father for the kid having lost their mom. But saying he just needs to get over it or do something else, and it doesn't really come across as like genuine care. It comes across as like she's a little exhausted from, you know, raising now her great grandkids. But I've never lost anyone, and I can't speak to that. But you would think like the first year would be the most difficult, right? It's like a whole year of firsts without his wife. I really do think a little more grace from Nana Mama would have gone a long way. And like I said, this would have all been fine in the first half of the show. But keep in mind, a lot of these things are now happening while he's trying to take down the serial killer and save an innocent woman from being murdered. And they got a ticking clock. Fine for the first half, jarringly out of place for the second half. And speaking of jarring, the editing to the show does no favors either. It jump cuts between scenes constantly. Scene about detective work, jump to next location, jump cut home, jump cut to next location. Like, what is the passage of time in these episodes? Where's the distance? Like, the lack of cohesion and sense of time distance between any of these scenes just make everything feel so jumbled and out of place. Let's go check this place out. Okay, jump cut to place. Feels patchy and rushed. Ironically, the scenes with the killer and his victim, they take their time, and that feels like a way more cohesive storyline than anything going on with the police. Being stuck to the one location of the murder room, for example, allows them to get a little more creative with lighting and camera work compared to the flat shots like used elsewhere. When cutting between the two, it makes the police work seem, well, visually boring, and again, they usually drag with repetitive dialogue anyways, as I mentioned. Someone took 6 episodes and just used copy and paste with Cross and his family to pad it out to 8 episodes, right? I would be way more forgiving of the pacing if they could just focus on the killer story. It eventually kind of does, but they mess up the ending, so it's not even worth your time then. So the killer's creating a book documenting his kills, as well as live streaming them or something, which now I think of it, I'm not really sure gets any resolution, but I digress. He's doing all this for fame, right? He actually sends his completed book to the journalist, and she's like, Cross, what do I do with it? He's panicked because of a family emergency and tells her to sit on it for 3 days. Well, after we resolve Cross's family drama, which, honestly is a storyline I don't even want to talk about because I didn't really care for it that much, he goes to sit down with our killer, Ed Ramsey. And as Ramsey starts confessing to all of his kills, Cross says he's only being charged with one. This infuriates Ramsey as, well, everyone knows he killed all the others, but Cross says there's no proof. Ramsey says he has the kill book and it documents everything. We then cut to a live stream of Sampson burning the book. Like, dude, that is evidence. And not just some evidence, it is a well-documented piece of evidence. The book got left behind at a previous crime scene as Ramsey's goon, Bobby, was escaping. And so it already was been entered into evidence. One. And then two, when it is revealed that the vaguely gay Asian cop is working with the villains, is because they put a tracker in the book. This is significant because when Wu goes to hand the book over to Bobby, Cross and Sampson show up, leading to Bobby shooting Wu and running. So this book is pivotal in at least like the IA investigation around like Wu, to say nothing of the officer involved shooting reports. So burning the book, that no one will know it was Ramsey, but here's the problem. It's going to come up in court at some point, and now the police won't be able to produce the book. I have to think this puts them on the line for all sorts of problems with the handling of the case, and opens up to who knows whatever issues concerning their handling of evidence in previous or even future cases. Just wildly unbelievable that all these people, especially Cross, who is big on justice, would just lie and destroy evidence that has already been well documented. Hell, their murder board in the other room has photocopies of all the pages. Some of the pages had DNA on them. You sent them out to get, you ran the DNA on them. To think burning the book would solve the problem is just absolutely terrible writing. I mean, this insults not only the audience's time with how they've put this whole mystery together, but it insults your intelligence and its resolution. I mean, come on. Now, I don't want to be all negative here. There are a few things that I rather do like. Aldous Hodge occasionally gives some pretty emotional stuff in the show, especially concerning his kids and dead wife. There's some pretty good scenes there. The acting actually across the board is pretty good. I'm not going to lie to you. It's a pretty talented cast, and they do the best they can with the mediocre writing. But the standout has to be Isaiah Mustafa as John Sampson. His character by far has the best writing in the show, with the best arc, and some truly touching moments where he gets to show some pretty complex emotions. There's a scene where he has to arrest his lieutenant in particular. That was awesome. That was a really good scene. She had just asked him to be the godfather of her unborn child. He says yes. And then he has to turn around and arrest her. And she's like, "You made a promise, John. You made a promise." And it's really good stuff. I appreciated that quite a bit. But as you can probably tell, I just overall don't think very highly of the show. It's 6 hours stretched into 8, and there just isn't enough substance to hold it together. It's a waste of time and potential, to say nothing of the fact that it overall feels very amateur in execution. They miss out on exploring some pretty interesting themes and ideas, and I can't help but wonder if they found themselves at odds with the ideas they had started with 4 years ago in the wake of George Floyd, and their ideas now, because the show can't really decide what it wants to be. All it just makes it a slog to get through. It's mostly boring and interesting. I just couldn't find something to really get excited about in this, and it's kind of a shame. Now, I know the show was greenlit for a second season before season 1 even came out, which makes me nervous that the sophomore effort may repeat some of the same mistakes, but I'll have to wait and see. Anyways, thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.